Hello and welcome to the Big Bold Jewish Climate Fest. We're so happy to have you here today. We've had several days of amazing events and learning already happening, and I'm very excited to be here today with David and Yossi talking about the solar revolution. This festival is about making climate change and climate action a central moral priority of the Jewish community. We are in the midst of an energy revolution. It's already happening, and these two men are the pioneers and drivers that are making it happen internationally. While every action, personal, communal, political, etc., all matter to move the needle on climate change, revolutionizing our energy systems is absolutely critical and urgent and within reach, thanks to the leadership of guys like this. Jews have a solid history of navigating through revolutionary change. We left Egypt as slaves and became our own free people. The temple was destroyed, and we invented rabbinic Judaism to reimagine our rituals. And then when we were dispersed around the globe, we wrote down the Oral Torah in order to create and maintain the unity of our people. So we know how to navigate system change. We're actually really good at it. So it's not a huge surprise that many of the leaders of our current energy revolution are Jews. So today we're going to explore system change, specifically looking at solar, the implications and opportunities, and then we'll close with some action steps that you all can be taking. So thank you for being here. To introduce our two guests, David Arfin is the CEO of 9.Energy. He is a globally recognized leader in creating innovative finance offerings that accelerate the adoption of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and other clean technologies. David invented SolarCity's Solar Lease, the game-changing solar financing program that enabled over 1 million American homeowners, commercial and government customers to adopt solar power, and drove SolarCity to a market capitalization of over $2 billion until it was acquired by Tesla. He has been a lead of multiple solar companies in France, Mexico, India, the US, and Israel, and previously served as a consultant to the US State Department of Energy and an emissary for the US Department of State. Among other accomplishments, he is a Wexner Heritage alum and was the president of Gideon Hausner Jewish Day School in Palo Alto, and he's on the board of the Friends of the Arava Environmental Institute for Environmental Studies. I met him through my brother, who works in solar, and in a classic game of Jewish geography, discovered we have many people in common because he has familial roots in the greater Seattle area, as do I. And Yossi Abramowitz is the president and CEO of Energiya Global Capital, as well as the co-founder of the Arava Power Company. He's an activist and former candidate for the president of Israel. Yossi has a track record of seeing opportunities and setting bold, ambitious goals and achieving them, from the Soviet Jewry movement to integrating technology in Jewish education, and now he's doing the same with solar in Israel and Africa. So much so that he's earned the name Captain Sunshine. Arava Power is Israel's leading solar developer and a pioneer in mid-size and large-size solar fields, and built the first grid-connected solar field in Israel with over 1.2 billion worth of projects in the works. Energiya Global develops affordable solar projects worldwide with the goal of providing clean electricity for 50 million people. Yossi was a very early mentor of mine as I began as an entrepreneur in the Jewish community, and I'm deeply honored to still be collaborating with you in many ways. So, both of you have had really amazing careers in various areas before you got into solar. So, start with that. Tell us how you got into this industry and what skills and experience you're leveraging to really power this solar revolution. David, would you like to start?
Sure thing. Thanks, Lisa, and thanks for hosting this. This is an amazing festival, and I'm honored to be a part of it. So, I started very innocently. I was not setting out to get into the energy world or getting into the finance world. I am a serial entrepreneur. I am based in Silicon Valley. I was in the process of redoing my roof at home in 2006 and went one night with my wife to see the Al Gore movie, An Inconvenient Truth. And it hit me that, gee, I, as a citizen, can be doing something to fight climate change. So I wanted to see what I could do for our roof and whether I could go solar or not. Sure enough, I went out and tried to see what it would take to add solar to our new roof system. And the best quote that I had from a salesperson was it would be a simple payback of 33 years. And I said, why would anybody do this? If I'm going to make a contribution to the environment, there's other ways to do it that would give me bang for buck. So I started learning from scratch all about things like net metering and tax credits and depreciation and what a kilowatt was and what a kilowatt hour was. And this was already mid-career to late career for me. And I had some aha moments where it occurred to me that if I own the system on your roof, I can do it much more affordably than you owning the system on your roof. And so we came up with the idea of third party ownership of systems. And we took that idea, it changed the risk from you putting solar on your roof and paying for it to me putting solar on your roof and I pay for it and I'm responsible for it. It changed your profile, your risk analysis, and enabled people like you, Lisa, to do something that you might have wanted to do anyway, which is put renewable energy above your ceiling and to feel good about what it was doing, and also to save money while you were doing it without having a big upfront cost. So that's how I got into it, and it's been a terrific ride ever since.
Amazing. And Yossi?
Thank you, and hello everybody, and thanks for the invitation. I also, in a sense, also have an accidental path going from a Jewish educator to a climate activist, but not really. So I'm going to tell you a little secret. I had lived in Israel. My parents, after the '67 war, were swept up in kind of this modern messianism, and we made Aliyah in 1969. I was in Israel from '69 to '72, and I was 5 to 8 years old. And that was a miraculous time to be here, because it was the sense that history was on your side and anything is possible. And we had gone to Boston in '72, so I missed the emotional crush of the Yom Kippur War, which kind of dampened everybody's sense of too much optimism. So I came to the States imprinted with history's on our side, good can win, maybe even there's a finger of God somewhere in there. And my apartment, I lived on the 3rd floor above a gas station, and the Arab oil boycott was happening during Yom Kippur War. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that, you know, I'm all the way from Israel here in Brookline, Massachusetts, and still the war is going on. We have to do something about this oil. A couple years later, Jimmy Carter puts panels on the White House, and I go, oh my God, you can do that? So I've had this flirtation with solar power for much of my childhood, and then took a pause to do activism, kind of honed my skills of beating up governments for good causes, building teams to do, take things from impossible to possible, and certainly know how to mobilize global action in the service of big moral issues, which we can go into. And we had moved to Kibbutz Keturah in the Arava, and it was really hot and sunny, and the rest is history.
Amazing. So, Yossi, tell me a little bit about, like, from your other organizing efforts leading up to this, you have like a lot of different skills to come to this as a revolutionary, if I can use that word, right? You're a pioneer that's pulling together like the policy and the relationships and the economics and the funding and the culture change and all of those pieces. And I'm curious, as you think about this big system change, like what are all those areas? How do they work together? What are the places that are easy to solve for, and what are the things that are really hard to solve for?
What a smart question. Look, first of all, you need teams. It's not just me doing it, or it's all those skill sets that you outlined are totally necessary in system change. But you need a little bit of kind of secret sauce, and the secret sauce I really think is the legacy of the Jewish people. In a sense, this can do to overcome what looks like a giant dark wall of history. Whether it's returning to a homeland after 2,000 years, how unlikely was that? That required global Jewish moral action, right? In a sense. You look at the history of the Soviet Jewry movement, right? A moral case that required global action. You look at, I'm a child also of the anti-apartheid movement and was privileged to partake in that. And so things that looked insurmountable then somehow became possible. And it takes a certain kind of vision and strategy and all the things people learn in business school, which I respect, but I didn't go to formally. And my education comes from, you didn't have the long list of failures when you did the introduction, Lisa, but it also comes from sometimes not succeeding or having to pivot and to figure things out. But the audacity to kind of see the world the way it should be is true for human rights. It's true for our messy return to and miraculous return to Zion. And it's true also about stopping to destroy God's majesty. I mean, it's clear as day.
And David, a
So
lot of
let
what
me
you do
just add
is
to that.
solving for a different equation, right? Like how to get people who have good intentions to actually take the action that will collectively create this revolution. Talk to us about how you design for that.
Yeah, well, behavioral economics is fundamental, which is how do you get somebody to do something that they would like to do, but there are obstacles in front of. And what I think is really neat, and kind of building off of what Yossi was talking about, this is a really interdisciplinary area, and that's something that I enjoy. Jack of many trades and master of none. It's also something that's fundamentally part of, I think, our DNA, and certainly it's what makes a lot of Israelis really good entrepreneurs, which is you have to think in an interdisciplinary way. You need great chemistry, you need physics, you need finance, you need marketing, you need sales, you need design, you need architecture, you need public policy, you need community organizing, you need accounting. It's so interdisciplinary to be able to solve this multi-headed monster that is required. If you are just a chemist, you can do something really interesting with that battery, but that doesn't get into market. And so I think the one of the reasons that we do what we do is because we get to work with teams who come from different strengths and who are, fundamentally interdisciplinary, and that makes it fun. It makes it interesting. It also means that every day you can learn new things, and that's a treat.
Well said.
It does feel like we're at a certain tipping point at this exact moment, like in the world, in American politics, maybe in Israeli politics, in the technology and the culture. I'm curious if you can just talk a little bit about that tipping point. What is it that's creating being at that point? And then what do we need to just like tip a little bit more in the other direction, whether it's the efficiency of the panels or the arc of the innovation in the technology or the incentives from government and tax credits? Like, what are the pieces of the puzzle that are making this a really ripe tipping point? David?
Well, I think policy comes from public will. And I think right now, and especially right now, this very week, we have kind of a new lease on life. No pun intended. We have a new lease on life. And having just watched the Biden-Harris inauguration and seeing what kind of putting this past chapter behind us, and what looking at what's ahead of us, I think is really a moment in time, and we can call that a tipping point. But we didn't just stumble on a tipping point. We're building on the shoulders of all of those chemists and physicists and engineers and production people, who the key thing at the end of the day is going clean, going green is cheaper than the alternative. And at the end of the day, That's what gets us to the tipping point, and that's what is some nice roads ahead. It's not without resistance. You know, clean energy has its detractors. There are people who are willing to question science, question facts, question the ability to make changes, who have vested interest in current systems, who will resist. But all that said, the public will, the public interest, the global awareness of the crisis that is the climate crisis is right at our doorstep, and it's our opportunity to walk through that door.
Yeah, I agree. And like, I used to think it was technology. We have a technology park down at Tura with different pieces and all that, because we were trying to solve for the cost factor, because solar was here and a carbon kilowatt was over here. But Dave and everybody has solved for that. It's actually, I mean, we should continue to improve our technology. We should continue to bring down the cost of installed kilowatt. But we are actually already there. Like, in a sense, if we didn't make any more improvements over the next 10 years, right, that we could actually solve for this now. So what's the tipping point? The tipping point is moral leadership. That's all that's missing, is moral and clear leadership. We actually all know what to do. Like, we know what to do. You can end the subsidies for the fossil fuel industry. You can price carbon. You can stop giving drilling licenses. We should, get rid of the combustion engine car within X number of years and give everybody a heads up. We should stop eating meat. Like, we all know what to do, and the economics mandates that we do it. The reason why it's not happening is because the system is rigged. $5 trillion worth of subsidies globally for the fossil fuel industry, and that's happening. We, the citizens, we're not voting as if that usually matters. We do want to congratulate all the voters in the United States. Thank you. That will have a ripple effect in Israel and worldwide. So that's part of the tipping point. But I think the tipping point is Greta and what I call the climate kids. Like, it's the clear moral voice that is calling out simultaneously around the world as the fires are burning and as the storms are happening and as the evidence is just there before our very eyes, and the policymakers are making policy without seeing it, and the kids are saying, take your hands down. It is about moral leadership, and we strive to be a moral people, and so we can play a leadership role in making this happen.
Awesome.
Let me just amend that a little bit to say it is about moral leadership. It is about conviction, but it's also about economics and markets working. And the nice thing now, the critical thing now, is that we're not making a trade-off, which is we could be good for the environment or we could be good for the economy. We're good for both. We are creating jobs. We are reinforcing positive behaviors in a whole bunch of different ways across the clean tech world. And so it's not just a sacrifice. In fact, it's a very good investment. And I think we're going to see more and more of that over the next several years.
So Yossi, you've been doing this in Southern Israel and also in other countries around the world. Like, you set some really bold goals and have achieved them. I'm curious if you could just tell us the short version of that story. Like, help us see into the future a little bit when we can claim in our own localities, maybe across the US, that we have set bold goals and achieved them.
Okay, so I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Bold goal number one is to get Israel to be 20% renewables by 2020. However, we had a backup plan. And the backup plan, maybe we can get the Red Sea to the Dead Sea, the Arava and Eilat, to be 100% solar powered by 2020. And everyone said it's impossible. The electric company said you can't do more than 10, 20%. Instability of the grid, the regulators is not economical. There's no precedent worldwide. And the strategy was try to beat up the national government on having sort of bold goals. And at the same time, it's leadership by example. And that's a good, Jewish and Zionist acharai kind of dugma ishit. And so despite all the obstacles, and there's no global precedent, we're really proud to announce that we've marked 6 months now of Red Sea to Dead Sea, daytime 100% solar, the first region in the world to do that. And it'll be the first region to go solar day and night by 2025. Now, that's not gazillions of gigawatts, I want to be clear, but it's sort of the pilot. Israel's a good platform to solve global problems because we have a lot of things we have to, like water, whatever it is that you need to work out. And so we've worked it out now for this part of Israel, and we're using that to challenge Israel now to go 100% daytime by 2030. And we're fighting a very powerful gas and oil lobby. And that's the model we're trying to export now to Africa, because when we talk to heads of state there, they go, no, the consultants from the European Union told us this, and the World Bank, and and I'm like, come to Israel, I'm going to show you what 100% looks like. And then they come and they're like, we want to do that.
Kol hakavod.
Team efforts, lots of teams, yeah.
And David, tell us about projects that you've been working on in cities and countries where you're creating models that might be replicable.
Sure. So I'm working on projects in Mexico, in France. I was working on projects in India for the off-grid, and I think it's important to kind of talk about what what the opportunity is and what the need is there. There's currently approximately 2 billion people in the world who don't have regular access to electricity on a 24/7 basis. We take for granted that we're going to have access, that we can do our homework at night, that we can refrigerate things, that we can power our cars even, whereas much of the world is still energy deprived. Some of the reason is because of governments failing to make it a priority and failing to serve their people. These are not technological challenges, these are human problems. And so some of the work in India that I did with a company called Simpa Networks was to help do a pay-as-you-go system for small solar home systems. So a 60-watt panel and a battery might give light for 4 to 6 hours to a family so that they had that in the evening. So as we think about kind of what revolution looks like, we should think about the big revolution and how many megawatts and gigawatts of clean energy we can develop and how we can power our cars this way. But we also have to think about those who are currently using kerosene and diesel for the very basics of what humans need. And I think these go hand in hand. There's different sets of problems, there's different sets of solutions, but we can learn a lot from those solutions as we're developing in the modern world, and I should say in the Western world and in the developed countries and the highly developed countries and the high energy consuming countries. We can learn a whole lot. And the other projects I do are really kind of exporting the same models that we know work in the United States and in Europe and in parts of Asia, which is what you really want to do to help somebody adopt clean technologies is to make it so that they are always better off. They are unambiguously better off for going solar or for using an electric vehicle or for building a charging station or for using a scooter or what have you. They are better off than what their alternative is. And this is where business model innovation comes in and exporting the business model innovations. And every market is going to be different. Every culture is different. You're going to have a playbook of a lot of different things that might work. And in that playbook of 20 things that you have seen work in a new area, new territory, new country, new region, 8 of those things are going to apply. And you need to be nimble and think about what that local community, society, government, and power structure, no pun intended, but the authorities need in order to bring the power and the energy to that community.
Yossi, I see you nodding about the business models.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because when we started in Israel, I actually thought it was going to be a nonprofit because we were based in the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies, and then we did a back of the envelope kind of calculation for Israel to go 20% renewables would have to raise $20 billion. And it's like, nobody is that good. So we needed a business model. And when David started to talk about really the masses of people who don't have access to energy reliable and affordably, I've taken on essentially Africa. Africa has 600 million people without access to power. There's another 200 to 300 million burning expensive and polluting diesel. And the population of the continent is going to double in the next generation. So we have an unlimited opportunity to do mitzvot, to lift human dignity, right? To me, it's the human rights campaign, because without access to green and affordable power, how can you really have education nowadays, right? We're talking about vaccines, right? How can you have healthcare if you don't have access to power, let alone the dignity of a job, manufacturing and refrigeration for food and all these other things. And so, to me, this is a global moral imperative. We're doing whatever cutting and pasting and adapting, because David's right. It's not cookie cutter. To Africa and playing a catalytic role. I mean, in addition to deploying capital, and I think the trick for people like us, we go by a quadruple bottom line, because people have to make money, and for some people that will be primary. But you know what? If they can make money and kill the use of diesel on the planet for electricity, 9% of the electricity is being produced by diesel burning in the developing world. That's an easy one because we're a third the price, right? If you have humanitarian benefit, like in Rwanda, we're an orphan youth village. In Burundi, we're in like the poorest district, and doing a lot of corporate CSR programs and healthcare and other things. And then if there's a development goal, I mean, we're able to add in Burundi in about a month, 15% of the generation capacity of the country without growing any of the emissions, right? And so it's hard. We also don't want to say, oh yeah, you just put together the model and you get to work. But to me, because it's quadruple bottom line, and I do think we have an extra responsibility as a Jewish people, A, because our emissions are way above average worldwide, and B, because we've seeded moral revolutions before. At least I loved your opening and leaving Egypt and understanding what we're leaving behind, and changing a different kind of power structure. And in a sense, it goes back to that, because Egypt was the absolute hierarchy of a cult of death, right? And I actually see some similarities. I haven't thought this before, but about like the oil companies and the fossil fuel lobby, because what David's doing, and I'm doing in part, but David's really doing, this is the democratization of access to power. And because in our faith system, for those of us who are faithful in one way or the other, there's no intermediary, right? We're all equal before God, and we're all endowed with, therefore, infinite the right to infinite dignity, right? So if there's no intermediation, not just theologically, but also energy-wise, then you are more in control of your destiny, and you can lift your dignity and that of your family. So it's tikkun olam with a business model. And while I still do my charity and my advocacy and all of that, including the Arava Institute, to me, everything now has to scale in a way that we've never seen before in history. And the election in the U.S. is, I think, sort of when the shot goes off for and now everybody runs in this incredible race to the next UN conference and then to the end of the decade. And I'm one of those people who actually, I'm very upset with a lot of my climate friends who are talking about mitigation. I think we can win this. I think we can win it big.
So one thing I'd like to add, if I may, which is, it's not just Yossi and David and others who are pushing solutions to these other places. We're invited. There's a desire to figure out how you can adopt solar, wind, battery storage, the appropriate technologies for that appropriate areas. And it's one of the ways that certainly Israel, as a light unto the nations, Israel is looked at, and Arava is looked at, and Yossi does these tours for leaders from around Africa who come to Kibbutz Keturah and see what can be done. And that's an Israeli perspective. As an American perspective, we also know that there is a desire and we are invited to go to different places. So in the past couple of years, I've been invited to go to Angola and to help them think through, as a guest of the US State Department, been invited to Angola, been invited to Israel, been invited to Palestine to encourage and educate them for what models we have used work. So there's a hunger, there's a desire, there's a model of success. Can we do something about this? So it's not just business people trying to push something on the masses. It's also this, show us how we do it and let's get there faster.
Yeah, that's an important part of that tipping point for sure, is the
Yeah.
hunger and the desire to make it happen. I'm curious for both of you to just name for us, what are the next few milestones of this revolution? Like, what are you looking to in any aspect, from the technology to the policy to the culture to whatever else? How do we know that we are really achieving this tipping point and the revolution to a whole new kind of energy system? What should we be watching for, and what are the things that people should be supporting or driving at?
I can start. I mean, we're all mandated under Paris, so congratulations on your return to Paris. We're all mandated now to come back with binding commitments through 2030, which have to essentially more than double our initial commitments. And so every country now has to pass a climate law. Israel has thus far failed. We have a good draft one that the energy minister and the finance minister are blocking, just a blatant play by the oil and gas lobby, and failure of moral leadership in our country. And maybe by the time everybody tunes in to the end of this broadcast, we would have managed to get it on the table of the government. We'll see, and maybe pass it. We're fighting that every day. So one is to up our goals. Two is market signals. I mean, the fact that Biden and Harris are about to deploy $2 billion is $2 trillion. And when you look at the green growth, like soon as COVID happened, Europe was amazing. They understood it. This is actually going to be an accelerator, because one day we have to get out of our COVID shattered economies, and then they decided to build back better and greener. And so their whole master plan is a green growth plan. And they just set a goal for the EU of 55% renewables by 2030. That's great. But the Biden-Harris 100% clean energy by 2035 is now going to change the goalposts for everybody. We have to see money move. Divest, invest, I think is very important, both on a personal basis, like we should individually. I think it's hard for me, I can only speak for myself, but I would hope my community will stop investing in the forces that are destroying the planet. All of our investments have impact, and unfortunately some of them are very negative. And by the way, you're going to lose your money if you stay in fossil fuels. There'll be stranded assets, because the carbon pricing is coming, right? Because the wildfires are increasing, and because we have a sane, climate-friendly government now in the United States. And I think this is going to be a multiplier. We're seeing by the electric cars that they used to be only one or two companies, and now every company has its version. We're lacking moral leadership in the Jewish community. I think it should be treif for anybody who's a Jewish leader or a rabbi, anybody who has a position to buy a combustion engine car. Fine, if you need a hybrid for whatever reasons. But I think we need to all lead by example of how we use our own money. and to see that pace pick up. But it's going to be about money moving. It's going to be about enforceable targets. It's going to be about market share of companies as well. And we've seen a big burst now in Israel on the stock exchange for some of the companies. Not yet ours. Calm down. Maybe soon. I'm not allowed to talk about it. But the market is going to dictate a lot of this, and also just how quickly they're going to clamp down on the energy companies. I mean, it really is. There's no excuse economically to continue these subsidies, and if there's a level playing field, this big bold climate festival would be drinking l'chaim that we've all hit 100%.
David, anything to add?
Well, Yossi, you're inspiring. and just listening to you, I have a few thoughts about additional thoughts about what I want to bring into my life and in my communities. I don't have, frankly, the yardsticks for what it means when we are there, or how we're going to know how close we are to there, because it's just this continuous notion to be better, whether it's in the cars that we drive, the planes that we fly, the foods that we eat. There's a whole sustainability world out there, and there's not one metric that's going to say, all right, we're a quarter way there or we're halfway there. I wish there were. There is not. I think the most important thing that's happened in the last few years is the cultures have changed. And I think the culture of what it means to be sustainable and to think about sustainability and the massive cost of climate change, as we have seen in California from the wildfires and the force of hurricanes that have come in. I think that those are going to matter. And the other crisis, one of the other crises, in addition to our healthcare crisis, is our inequities crisis and the racial inequities. And this is closely tied together with clean energy. If you look around an urban area, dollars to donuts, or shekels to sufganiyot, Yossi. Nice. Dollars to donuts. The poorest areas are going to be the ones that are next to a large carbon emitting plant that has a 300-foot smokestack that is pumping out NOx and SOx that are doing deleterious impacts on breathing, on asthma rates, etc. And I don't think we can divorce climate justice from climate itself. We have to be very sensitive to what our climate is doing, who it is doing it to, and those measures. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but we have to increase our awareness of the neighborhoods that we're impacting, as well as the hiring and the leadership and the people that are part of this movement. It can't just be old white men who are involved and at the table. We need a level of diversity that is evolving, but is not there.
Right. Who are you calling old? Okay, wait. So I'm glad you used the term climate justice.
Yeah.
And justice drives me as well. But David, you dropped a hint before. Palestinian Authority. You were consulting for the Palestinian Authority. What do you feel comfortable sharing?
So the Palestinians and the Palestinian Authority is incredibly interested in energy independence. They want clean energy. I was brought by the State Department to meet with business leaders, bankers, policy leaders, government officials, utilities, and they take great pride in the fact that they have great sun, better sun than Israel proper. But they also have something that's really at their core, which is, and it bugs them, which is this dependence on the Israel Electric Company. That when they want power, they have to buy it from the Israelis. If power shortages happen, They are subject to Israeli political issues. And from a nation, from a people, from a pride side, they want that independence. And there's no reason that they cannot build up their own ecosystem of distributed generation, distributed storage, and move towards more independence and interdependence without being solely at the whim of the Israel Electric Authority. And guess what? The Israel Electric Authority would say they want the same thing. But Yossi would say everything is political, and that may not be a uniform view. But I was really impressed when I went there. And I'll note I went there, I got invited to go there by the State Department in early January 2017, when we still had when President Obama was president. I think they were trying to push money out the door and bring resources to that. And I went there in February of 2017, when Donald Trump had already been inaugurated. And I do think that, the world of economic development is something that we share, whatever your views are on where the border should be and how many states there should be. There's no question that economic independence is a shared goal that everyone has, and that the best way to keep things chill on some level is for more people to feel invested in the economy and in the progress that can happen. Not to mention the technical prowess of Palestinian engineers and leaders is really impressive, and they can and should be part of leading the solar revolution.
So we have some questions to get to in our
Great.
last few minutes together. There are people asking about action steps. So we've been talking about like big system change. And for individuals who are thinking about their own lives and their own families, and for communal leaders, say people who are board members of a synagogue, for example, what are some very practical pieces of advice that you would give those folks? Where should they be investing their time, energy, dollars, education to help move the needle?
I'm a proud member of Kol Neshama, kind of the flagship Reform congregation here in Jerusalem. 7 years ago, they asked me to do a Torah drash on the Noach story, right, for all the obvious reasons, and I did. And then, I sort of chastised them a little bit about, because we didn't have solar on the roof and whatever, and they sort of did whatever, but nothing happened. Well, a new rabbi comes into Kol Neshama and says, "Hey, can you do Noach?" And I'm like, "Are you sure you want me to?" And I said, like, "Yeah." So I did, and I let him have it, actually, because it was 7 years since the last time. Come on, folks, they have a great roof. We'll get 100 kilowatts, I think. 50 kilowatts up there. So I'm really happy to say, I wouldn't really share the dirty laundry, but I'm happy to say that 2 months after Parshat Noach, they signed a deal for their roof. So one is, let's make all of our institutions carbon neutral, either directly or indirectly. Figure out your carbon footprint. Do a calculation. I'm about to go on a trip to Africa, and here I am trying to save the world from climate change, and I'm jumping on airplanes, right? So we do every year at Tu B'Shvat, the holiday of trees. We do a carbon calculation as a family, and we do offsets. Now, the Pope says offsets aren't moral. We actually also need to reduce, and he's correct. But I do want to advocate for offsets when you don't have the roof or any of those things. Look, I'm sorry to say this, as a grew up as a meat eater, I'm a reluctant vegetarian, but man, all my vegan friends, they're not wrong. I know I'm inching in a particular direction, and certainly at least on the red meat front. I think we just have to start saying it can't be part of our simchas, or just do maybe only on Shabbat, but never any time else. I've been convinced of, and again, I'm not perfect. I'm kind of moving in a particular direction. I know that drinking milk is like also like I'm having my moral issues and I'm wrestling with it, and I know where I'm going to end up, kicking and screaming. But I'm well on my way, um, and and you have to move your money. I mean, how can your rabbi pension funds be invested in ExxonMobil, whether it's directly or indirectly, and you're having a nice Tu B'Shvat Seder with plastic plates? I mean, come on. Like there's inadvertent hypocrisy, which we're calling out now, which means that next time you're going to look at your pension, oh, you rabbis, or you're going to plan whatever activity, just make the right decisions. And you guys as communities and congregants and people who know how to tweet and all of that stuff, you gotta call it out. You have to ask and create the communities that reflect your values, and you should be making investments that are aligned with your values. And at the end, they'll tell you actually the cost-free secret to saving the planet.
David, anything you want to add to that?
Well, that was a great teaser. I guess I would say there are so many things that we could do by participating in community energy, buying EVs, eating less meat, drinking less milk, whatever it is. But on the human side, we are human, and we could do a lot of good. And as the saying goes, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. And give ourselves some grace. Not the most Jewish concept, but but it's an important concept, and we are universal people. Take strides into and steps into what you can do, whatever those things are, and worry more about what you are able to do and what you can influence than what you cannot do personally, or to blow up, or to ostracize others. So we will get there in different ways. We have to build awareness. It may bring a little shock value. And Yossi, you're right that this is how one brings about awareness and evolution and revolution. But it's not going to get done in a day. And we have to kind of evolve to get there. And I know I have personally in my thinking and in my habits, and whether that's the Nissan Leaf that I drive, or the investments that I make, or the business decisions that I go into, they aren't perfect. They're not 100%, and I don't think that we can expect that of our institutions either. But that doesn't mean that we don't nudge and edge and create models and celebrate the successes of putting 50 kilowatts on a synagogue. No, that doesn't make all the air better and clean, and it doesn't rid us off of importing oil from places that we'd really rather not see our money to. But when you buy a car, and whether that's an electric car or a car that has better gas mileage or is hybrid, you're making a statement, you're taking a step, you're setting an example. You're also doing what I think is critical, which is creating that new economy and bringing things to the economies of scale. So when Yossi goes to Africa this week, and he's going to be working on installing projects that on the margin are going to be under $1 a watt. 10 years ago, on the margin, those were $3 to $5 a watt. So look how far we've come, and we've come this far because there were a lot of previous decisions that enabled economies of scale, from the production of solar, from the quality of inverters, but also from the financiers who, at the end of the days, look to see, one, are these systems going to work? And two, are the recipients of the power, of the energy, going to make their payments on time? And we stand on those shoulders, and I think we just, like I said, cannot let perfection be the enemy of the good, but we should drive as hard as we can towards the good.
Yeah, I think that's really important advice. And I also find that there's psychological barriers that we just need to acknowledge and get past in many ways. So, for example, I live in Seattle and I have a huge tree in my yard, which I love, that shades much of my house. And
Hmm.
I have assumed for years that we are not a good candidate for solar. And my brother, who works in the solar industry, was like, well, you never know. All they do is look at a Google satellite image of your house and they can tell you. It never occurred to me that the first step would be so easy and so simple. And it's like, when you start an exercise program, the hardest part is literally getting up off the couch and walking out the door the first time, right?
Hmm.
And that's all it took was like an email, and somebody looked at a Google satellite image of my house and was like, oh, yeah, you can easily cover 50% of your power with some panels on your roof, even with the tree, even living in Seattle. My head exploded, right? So removing those perceived barriers to getting in and making that change and contributing to the good, even if not perfect, I think is super important. And we've had a number of sessions about adding solar, both to commercial buildings and also to residential. And SunPower, who's a sponsor of the festival, is offering a friends and family discount. So for
All
folks who are
right.
interested in that, feel free to go back and look at the website, and you can learn more how to take advantage of that or go replay those sessions if you're interested. My last question for both of you, actually, I have two more questions, a short one and a bigger one. The short one is people who are interested in getting into this industry. We've got college students and people early in their careers who are watching, and maybe some people who, at this weird year of life are thinking about a career pivot, even midlife. And I'm wondering if you have any advice for folks who might be interested in getting into the solar industry professionally.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So one is don't be thinking like a nonprofit. System change requires a lot of money to move. And the reason I did not get arrested on Wall Street during the big climate march was it 4 or 5 years ago, is because it was an anti-capitalist message. And I'm not saying pure capitalism should run rampant, but if money has to move, then all the skill sets that people go to business school for, or a whole research, engineering, all of these other things that you may not have, you may have said, oh, do-gooder stuff is this kind of skill set, and business is business, right? No, if it's going to scale, it has to be able to attract great people with incredible skill sets that want to be part of this major transformation. And so study those things. If you want to solve climate change, well, get an MBA, learn entrepreneurship. Those kinds of things are necessary. Learn how to take and manage risks. Part of that, of course, anybody wants to come for a semester to the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies, you can go right to the birthplace of renewables in the Middle East and in Africa. We offer internships, selective, so hang on there. You have to, at energiaglobal.com. Summer ones are very hard to get into. During the semester, it's a little bit easier. They are unpaid, and we're oversubscribed all the time. But I think while you're young, go out there, build teams, make mistakes, kind of just go out and get your feet wet. Also, and this is how David started, policy wise, right? I mean, if you like public policy, politics, international relations, I mean, it's even if people wanted to do X, Y, and Z with solar or with any of these things, often the oil companies have gotten in the way with laws and rig the economics, Koch brothers on solar taxes on rooftops in some states and other kinds of things. So we need you to vote. We need you to be active. We need you to run for office. There's a great environmentalist in Slovakia who decided to run for president. And Susanna now is the president, and they have the greenest president on the planet. It's a good model.
David, anything to add?
So a couple things. One is it's a really good time to be thinking about this change and what you can do over a long period of time. It doesn't, as I said before, it's a very interdisciplinary movement. And so whether you're good at sociology and could figure out how communities move to make better decisions, whether you are deep into the physics, whether you're a software programmer that can model on Google what this roof is going to look like, design a better system, think about transportation, how engines work, how they can work better, whether it's finance, whether it's accounting, policy is absolutely critical. One of the things that gives me a little bit of hope in our hopeful future bipartisan consensus on that climate change is real is that when you listen to Republican staffers talk about how in the Senate and in the House, how their young legislative aides and interns are different than the old ones, they're not in denial anymore. They are saying, what is your position on climate change? Even if the bosses aren't quite there yet, there's this movement underneath. So I really think that the let's call them the 15 to 35-year-olds, broad brush, are so aware in a way that we were not, and their counterparts 10 years ahead of them weren't. They were hit by the 2008 recession, and that kind of defined that era. Greta and the many others who are organizing, who are thinking about it, it's just part of their lexicon now, and they will, as a whole, look at us and say, why are we not doing more? And if you're not doing more, move over and bless them. We will move over and we will enable them and encourage them to blow up the things that we thought were good enough and the progress that we've made, and take Yossi's gigawatt goal to a 10 gigawatt and do things that are unthinkable. But this is the message, I think, to people in mid-career or in early career is, we're in, using a baseball analogy, we're in the top of the third inning in terms of what change looks like, from a transportation, from a smart buildings, from an energy, from a agriculture. We haven't talked about that. I'm sure other sessions in this festival will be talking a lot about agriculture and vertical agriculture and intelligent uses of water and IoT, Internet of Things, that make us better and more efficient and more habitable. Again, these are not trade-offs. I can either have comfort, or I can have wealth, or I can have a better climate. Or I can have racial justice. These work hand in hand together, and I think that's, to me, a terrific. We're a community that is a easy community to join. There's a lot of hooks into this movement, and it's going to grow manyfold over the next decade.
Awesome. So my last question to you, and we're running short on time, so it's got to be a one-liner. I want to go back to Yossi's quadruple bottom line concept, and you both talked so much about the interplay of the economics and the business and the doing good in the world. And I want to add one other layer in there, which this is a Jewish festival. And so we're also talking about, why is this good for the Jewish people? And I'm curious, in closing, if you would just like to share a thought or a hope or a blessing of why and how, as we as a community prioritize climate action as a central moral priority of the Jewish community. Why is this also good for the Jews?
You want me to take it? Well, again, I want to congratulate you on the festival. It definitely gives me hope, and will hopefully unleash lots of constructive energy. When I was a Jewish educator, chair of my strategic planning committee, Joe Canfer, said to me, "You got to come up with a purpose, a mission statement." And for the nonprofit I was working at, and I came back and he goes, "No, no, no, for the Jewish people. Like, forget about the organization. You got to aim high." It took me forever, and I got what I felt was the most inspirational mission statement for the Jewish people. And nobody understood what it meant other than me, but I'll share it with you. The purpose of the Jewish people is to be an ongoing, distinctive catalyst for the advancement and evolution of morality and civilization. I was like, I nailed it. And everybody would look at me like a crazy person. They just didn't get it. I built one solar field in Israel. This is the beginning, right? And I say the purpose of the Jewish people is to be a renewable light unto the nations. Everybody gets that. It's just you can put that on a bumper sticker, in whichever way. But certainly the metaphors of light, we're small people. We've always been catalytic in our influence. We've usually been cutting edge in terms of ideas and strive towards moral leadership. And that's what we started with. And so my challenge, blessing and challenge, from a Jewish perspective, is the one thing I heard David say that I kind of disagree with, but only playfully. He says, "We're not going to solve this, folks, in a day." And I'm like, should I interrupt him? So I respectfully disagree. And let me tell you why. When you look at the greenhouse gas and pollution emissions in Israel on Yom Kippur, they're almost nil. On Shabbat, it drops at least 30–40%. If we, the Jewish community, remember who you are, Simba, right? Can kind of go back to your roots, right? If we would collectively reestablish the Shabbat as a true non-consumeristic day of rest, right? Remember your legacy. Remember this ancient call. Then our carbon footprint will go down by 1/7 overnight each week. And then we can, I think, legitimately morally challenge other faith communities to do the same. It doesn't have to be on the same day. That's the beauty of being one in one ecosystem and planet system. Cutting greenhouse, there's not a single action that any of us can point to that can actually happen in a day, a week, or a year that would reduce significantly. But what the tragedy of Corona is also kind of a wake-up call. What my teacher, Rabbi Jenny Rosen from Dainu, says is Corona was a fire drill for climate change. But you know what? There was a distinct drop in emissions and flights and travel and greenhouse gas emissions, and we know we can do with less. So let's return to our legacy, the gift of the Jews, and it's more than the Jews have kept the Sabbath has kept the Jews. Well, a global weekly Sabbath cutting across all faith communities, all denominations, would actually save the planet and be the tipping point, which we can all begin today.
Amen. Yossi, Rav Yossi, my teacher, my friend, you said it wonderfully. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Thank you both for this conversation.
Thank you, Lisa.
So much. I feel so inspired. And I just want to encourage our listeners as we come to the conclusion of our festival tonight. There's 2 more important sessions that if you've got a little more koach in you, we have a session at 5:30 Eastern coming up shortly about cities. And cities use 2/3 of the world's energy and generate more than 70% of the world's carbon. And so while we've talked a lot about kind of national level policy in this conversation, actually a ton of change is happening at the city and state level. So we have 3 city leaders, city council members, and others from Seattle, LA, and New York speaking at 5:30. And then tonight, closing out our festival, which I alluded to earlier, is The Future of Climate, a conversation with youth who founded a movement, with Jamie Margolin, who started 0 Hour, Katie Elder, Isha Clark, who's a Diller Teen Tikkun Olam Award winner, and Amalia Hockman. And we know that today's young people really feel the urgency of the issue and are making incredible things happen. And it behooves us to listen to them. and understand what they're thinking and feeling and what they're doing. We have a lot to learn. So join us for that exciting session. It'll be energetic, super creative. I promise you will leave inspired. You can find both of those and sign up at jewishclimatefest.org. And finally, as I mentioned before, if you're interested in adding solar, we had a session on residential and on commercial solar. You can go back and replay those and take advantage of SunPower's Friends and Family discount. Yossi and David, thank you so much. Keep up the good work.
Thank
and
you.
shine on. Be well.
Shine on, exactly. Shine on. Anybody
Shine
needs
on.
a discount in Israel, I'll set you up with somebody too. Really, thank you so much. David,
Thank you,
like what a
Lisa.
great thing to share together with Lisa.
This is uplifting. Thank you.
Awesome. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks, yeah.
Bye-bye.